we begin.
We're live.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Bienvenidos. Today you are joining us for Cultivating Voices live poetry. I'm Sandy Yannone, your host and the author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry. And as they say across the pond, I am absolutely gobsmacked to be joining you today from the home of Anita Rogness in Missoula, Montana, where we hosted the very first 6 weeks of Cultivating Voices live poetry when we started back in late March of 2020. Of course, then we were going live directly onto Facebook. It was quite a thing back in those days. And if you're interested in what that experience was like, you can go to all our archives on our Facebook group page and see what it was like when we were hosting our weekly open mic. Well, of course, we have now expanded our repertoire, and today are joining you for our new books showcase. I want to give a tremendous welcome to those of you in our Zoom poetry studio with us watching live, and those of you watching live on Facebook. I know that you have access now to so many readings, and I appreciate folks returning week after week to our reading series as we seek to offer always an eclectic, unique combination of writers and writing. Well, as I said, it's very gratifying to be able to bring our new book showcase back to Missoula for the, well, not even to Missoula, for the very first time, with 4 writers who are joining us, as I like to say, from coast to coast to coast today. That's the Pacific coast US, the eastern seaboard of US, and the western Atlantic of Ireland. All have been wonderful contributors to our reading series and poetry community since our earliest days. So today, please welcome Patricia Carragon, Bill Fay, Ann Walsh Donnelly, and Angela Dribben. So glad to have you here. And particularly since we know it is and is not easy to launch a book during the pandemic. So I really continue to appreciate being able to provide this virtual venue with an enthusiastic audience for our readers and our members. And I hope that you'll consider purchasing at least one book today, if not more, if you have the resources, if the resources allow. A reminder that the chats are live, both here in Zoom and on Facebook. So please send all the love to our folks reading today. Well, first up is Patricia Carragon. And I don't know how we did it. We must have had some mental telepathy. We're both wearing the polka dotted shirts, and I almost didn't at the last minute. I want to give a shout out in particular to Patricia. Not only is she a prolific writer across many genres, but she also hosts a very popular and energetic open mic reading series of her own, the Brownstone Poets in Brooklyn. And so I am always humbled when, you know, I have one of the hosts of a series that I was looking at in the early days to think about what it would be like to host a series. So it's really terrific to have Patricia here today. Well, Patricia Carragon's fiction piece, What Has to Happen Next, has been nominated for Sundress Publications' annual Best of the Net anthology. And her poem, Paris the Beautiful, won Poem of the Week from Great Weather for Media. I love Great Weather for Media. She was nominated by Bear Creek Haiku for a Pushcart Prize, and her latest books from Poets Wear Prada are Meowku and The Cupcake Chronicles. Her debut novel, Angel Fire, which she's going to be sharing some with us today, is from Alien Buddha Press. We've had some fabulous contributors from Alien Buddha Press here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And as I mentioned earlier, Patricia hosts Brownstone Poets and is the editor-in-chief of its annual anthology. If you've not been to Brownstone Poets, make a point to put that on your calendar one of these upcoming months. It's a really great experience. She is also the executive editor for Home Planet News Online. And as I mentioned, she lives and is joining us today from the one, the only, Brooklyn, New York. Would you please welcome Patricia Carragon?
Thank you, Sandy. And you were awesome when you read for Brownstone Poets. You and JP, her gang, it was wonderful. Yes, yes, great way to start the year. Okay, I'm going to read a segment from my first chapter from Alien Buddha Press. This is basically a story about three women, Sarah, Kate, and Dana, struggling during the post 9/11 world. And they get like paranormal visitations from a little girl who had a tragic death, but it's like, gets very convoluted. It's really like a taste of Stephen King at a bar at Sex in the City. So it's funny and tragic at the same time. Okay, let me read a segment. This is from chapter 1, began in 2001. Sarah Khan couldn't find her slippers. A cold sweat dampened her brow. Her thoughts wrestled with questions. Her intuition compelled her to write what she saw. Otherwise, something bad might happen. Like slumber sheep, her dreams demanded a recount. She wondered if this was a premeditated joke. Was stress the culprit? Why was she upset over the child's threats? She had never even met her outside of her dreams. However, Sarah, a sucker for superstition, believed without understanding why, that this kid wanted these chapters written, and Sarah wanted to write a novel. She pulled her long, mousy brown hair back into a ponytail before activating her Mac. She created a folder called The Alley Chronicles and placed a new Word document inside of it. She bit her tongue as the story moved across the screen. A girl named Allie skipped across the playground. The sky was a perfect shade of blue, like her blue mini dress trimmed in white lace. The sun was shining, a perfect setting designed for children's stories. But this wasn't a perfect story. She skipped toward the monkey bars singing. Her song had no title. She had complete ownership of the playground. A chimpanzee, Princess Allie, swung from one bar to another. Grunting, joy radiated throughout her kingdom, and the world was perfect now. No nasty bullies or grown-ups around to spoil it. As she swung closer to the sky, she forgot how pretty clouds could sometimes turn ugly and chase Mr. Sunshine away. When she saw a dark blur move through the azalea bushes, she stopped singing. Was the blur a dog, a cat, or a rabbit? Allie had to investigate. Sarah stopped typing. She recalled yesterday's dream and a few she had been having over the past few weeks. They involved Allie's mother, and Allie was the narrator. Sarah's fingers moved back into action. Allie became a loner, due to circumstances. She was born Alexandra Catherine in New York City, a mistake conceived by deception between two feckless people. Back in the late 50s, her mother, Siobhan O'Neill, an auburn-haired Bronx girl, was looking for a rich hitch at Steinberger's department store. Allie's father, Charles Hudson, a wealthy middle-aged schmatter merchant of Jewish descent, was peddling his wares to the girls on the sales floor. He had accidentally planted a few seeds, and those seeds had often sprouted on the doorsteps of orphanages. Allie's story had originally been written more than 50 years ago in a journal kept by Siobhan O'Neill. Siobhan had wanted to be a writer, but her lack of motivation, coupled with low self-esteem, kept her out of City College. Much to her parents' dismay, she took a job as a salesgirl at Steinberger's and pursued her writing at night. Shamed by her Catholic family for her reckless sin, Siobhan moved out of the Bronx apartment off Fordham Road. She spent the rest of her pregnancy on her own, her abortion expenses covered by the reluctant Charles. In a dingy office at Goldstein's Mercantile Warehouse down on West 54th Street, she handed $600 to the stocky matron who claimed that Dr. Samuels was on the way. But the doctor never showed up. The matron looked at her watch and said, "Sorry, honey, these things happen," and then packed her bag, pocketed the money, and departed. After the woman left, Siobhan paced the hallway. The November chill crept through the broken window. She didn't know what to do. An albino mouse scooted past the stairwell. Siobhan's mother believed that the souls of murdered people lived in mice. Seeing the ghostly mouse frightened Siobhan as she feared that this was a bad omen. She thought about the journal kept in the drawer by her bedside. Each page became an evolving story of her life, as if a fortune teller were speaking through her fingers. Meeting Charles Hudson, the wealthy merchant who had knocked her up and left her to pace these cold hallways in his God-forsaken warehouse, waiting for the abortion that would never be. And she would die giving birth to this child, Alexandra, and the child would be born cursed. Something terrified her about this journal, but she needed to write another entry each night. Writing was her addiction and only fulfillment in life. Yet, she refused to cry, too proud to admit her loss. She slowly walked down the stairs, accompanied by the echoes from her shoes. Her faithful loafers took her to the subway and to her walk-up on West 115th Street. She immediately called Charles, but as usual, he wasn't available. 7 months later, she was admitted to the emergency ward at Mother Cabrini Hospital. Avoiding her pleas for money, Charles conveniently took a trip to Chicago. Due to complications caused by fibroids and internal bleeding, the cesarean delivery proved fatal. From the baby's neck, the doctors and nurses removed a tight noose made from her mother's umbilical cord. They thought it was a miracle that this baby had survived. Deidre Smith, one of the nurses, kept her promise to Siobhan, recalling her request as she was being wheeled into the delivery room. If it's a boy, call him John Michael. A girl, Alexandra Catherine. Siobhan had had a premonition that she would not live to see her child. The motherless newborn screamed like a banshee. Deidre made the sign of the cross before swaddling the bathed infant in a blanket. The O'Neills buried their daughter at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx and forgave her. Little Alexandra was transported to Elizabeth Stiles' Home for Children in Manhattan and wasn't forgiven. The family wanted no part of the demon child with fiery hair. As far as they were concerned, this wailing creature had killed their daughter. Their motto was, Keep her out of sight and mind, and let God take care of the rest. After saving the document, Sarah's fingers paused. She sat motionless, watching a screensaver flip from one scene to another. Kittens ranging from domestic shorthairs to exotic. Cute, but they couldn't appease her irritability. But the coming of sunrise, the strident tweets of the birds kept her up for a while. As Sarah turned off the computer, she thought about the Steinberger's connection, since she worked for Steinberger's department store too. She shrugged it off as a coincidence. She was a secretary, not a sales associate. Her new Stearns and she placed the laptop back on the secondhand mahogany table. Her new Stearns and Foster twin mattress looked more inviting than ever. The birds got less vocal. It was Saturday, and she didn't have to go to work. She crawled under the covers and drifted into dreamless sleep. Thank you. It's tough reading this.
Wow. What an evocative, entrance into the novel, and all the places that I just keep thinking about Siobhan and the whole nature of her birth and the mystery around it, and what will continue to evolve. I mean, you are the first person that we've had read prose, so it was fabulous to open with such a vista of a story that would and to get the first chapter, how delicious is that?
It was only partial.
Only partial. What
Yeah.
a great place! What a great place to end the reading. A great place to end that.
Yeah.
I could feel it. Like Lucy Brock-Broido would always say this about poetry, that like a poem should click shut like a box. And I think with prose, it's really hard to choose what to read and to have it feel like it clicks shut and opens at the same time.
Mhm.
And you hit it.
I want to say a special shout out to Cindy Hockman, who's here. She edited this book. She runs 100 proof copy editing services. She's terrific.
Well, thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out. Patricia's an amazing.
She is great to continue because I was ready to quit.
I revived it.
Well, the book is, as you have heard, Angel Fire from Alien Buddha Press. Fantastic press, and of course, a fantastic literary citizen in Patricia Carragon, joining us today from Brooklyn. Thank you for getting us started off on this June day. And we move next from the East Coast all the way over to the West Coast. And my good friend from a member of the Olympia Poetry Network with me, Bill Fay. I remember the very first time hearing your provocative voice joining from the Olympia Poetry Network and figuring out how could you leap from OPN over to Cultivating Voices. It's been such a great journey of your persistence to get here today on Cultivating Voices. I know you've read in the open mics before, but I'm really glad to finally be able to feature you in the new books showcase. And in my possession while I'm here on the road, I do happen to have Bill's passages, the immigrant experiences, and he'll talk a little bit more about what the book entails. Well, let me give you the more formal biography about Bill. Bill Fay is a retired program manager and poet who has been published in numerous journals, including Creatrix, Cabinet of Heed, Creative Colloquy, a really fabulous journal out of Tacoma, Washington. I love what they do, Creative Colloquy, as well as Puget Sound Poetry, among many, many others. His recent chapbook, as I mentioned, Passages, Immigrant Experiences, from 2020 by Fox Island Press, was written to advocate for immigrants. His next chapbook, Hymns of the Homeless, which will be out a little later this year, also from Fox Island Press, advocates for the homeless on our streets. Bill holds degrees in fine arts, electrical engineering, and business administration. He's truly, truly a person of many ilks, mysteries, and wonders. He lives with his wife and their two bodacious cats, Tucker and Annie, on Fox Island in the Puget Sound area near Seattle. Would you please welcome Bill Fay?
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm thrilled to join you folks. I will be reading selections from Passages, Immigrant Experiences. I was commissioned by Aid Northwest, Advocates for Immigration and Detention Northwest, a nonprofit. And they were kind enough to allow me to go in with interpreters and actually do interviews with people that were in the ICE facility here in Tacoma on the Tide Flats and hear their stories. Combine those stories with academic research. I developed a series of 6 poems that are epic, sometimes in their proportions, pushing upwards of 20 pages a poem. And so I will not read an entire poem, I will read selections. The first one, I will say that there's a spiritual aspect to each of these. And so that's a good introduction for the first one, which I did on the Black experience in the Americas, including first passage, middle passage, and eighth passage. So the first one here I'm going to give you is a Yoruba creation myth to get us started, and then I will read more from the middle passage. This comes from the first passage. A gazelle's eyes for grandfather, for he was wise as an Niger. As long as memories hold him, his spirit walks with my children. They of the hyena anger scattered seeds upon the Niger, where first man and woman were formed, and first child of clay was born. Before we came of age in soils and river bends, before we came to dream of rocks and growing plants, before we breathed the sky, touched water and brown earth, a golden thread drew man to python, to woman, to man overflowing. Then Niger's children filled the quiet of the forest. All my people are these children, the birds, the beasts, the fish, the trees, the rocks, the soil, the brooks, the breeze. I have dreamed life's course with them. This is from the middle passage. Walk in pairings, shackle bound, to orchestrations of whips and shouts, to thin-lipped blue horizons on ox cart roads, the embryos of future planters' prophets. Weakened by restraint, in pain that's never feigned, from flashing handlers' smiles, eyes find the edgeless river with forests rocking on it. Their trees eat my children. each time the boats depart. All was noise from new arrivals. A dozen nations' voices rang until the bowsman's bullet sang. Hundreds stacked in harness wept. In a world of stark constraining, life of never-ending motion, where are the hopes of the children to know their spirit homes again? Stifling darkness, our new mother, cycle of the sun now ended, all hearts work to comprehend it. Bilge flows like bile between us. Rude the rolling rhythms, fill the closet time. Cup emptied spirits, fill the silent place. Rough-handled, shackled danced on the deck to another swaying afternoon. A day cup of water, a night cup of rice. Shooting stars of pain fill the empty holes where home lived. You taste the whip if you resist. You gain release in suicide. The chained jump together to sleepy sharks that chase the slavers. Some now shared their hopes for freedom, tapping out code to others listening, to revenge the ones gone missing, plans of desperation told. They bend to break the sacred vision, dreams to children who dwell in spirits, prayers to brooks that run in forests. The brave will not go silently. Rigging, hum the music of our fathers, fathers, fathers. We be the children of the forest, enduring as the lion, running as the hare, freer than the stork. The whip snaps reach crescendos with our dancing frenzy, caught in wonder, faces pale, from the sailors' frightened smiles. The cadence of creation from our mouths and bleeding feet. I became the stork that day, wearing feathers for my shackles, hope in wheeling violet arms to circumvent captivity. Light me from the deck to soar, gulping moon and sun and stars, that I may fly invisibly between the musket mamba teeth. In tune we turn to God's walls of bone, flesh, and chain, a rush like the lifeblood of the Niger, heading home again. Strong magic, needing stronger, whips and clubs rebuking, musket balls responding to the stork, the hare, the lion. The clearing smoke carried wraiths that walked the wind home. Like death and dawn in harmony, today the volleyed dead will sleep behind the dirge of shackled feet in edgeless rivered placid seas. My days unwind, in time unfolded, somersault my soul, empty introspection, unwinding retrospection, starch recollections, boiled too soft to hold their edges. Amnesia framed in ship's routines until I do not recognize the landfall when I see it. All my people are these children, the birds, the beasts, the fish, the trees, the rocks, the soil, the brooks, the breeze. I have dreamed life's chorus with them. That was a difficult one to write, in that I did try to recreate in poetry a slave uprising on a slave ship. And it turns out that that occurred. almost 1/3 of the time. Well, I also went down and created a completely different poem with interviews based with some Black Lives Matter folks here in Tacoma. I was trying to understand from my knothole about systemic racism. And I created this rhythmic little one here. It's the capstone for the Black Ivory series, of which I just read a portion. This is the never-ending passage. So, when all the hands were handed out, who made Ernie's left? When all the skin was handed out, who made Ernie black? When all the souls were handed out, who made Ernie's God? When all the songs were handed out, where was Ernie's hymn? When all the jokes were handed out, how could Ernie laugh? When all the tests were handed out, who made Ernie fail? When all the gates to schools were closed, who took Ernie's hope? When all the homes were handed out, who built Ernie's shack? When all the dads were handed out, why was Ernie shunned? When all the fathers died of drink, what comfort did he find? When all the jobs were handed out, who gave Ernie none? When all the guns were handed out, who gave Ernie one? When all the shouts for help rang out, why did no one come? So, when all the hands were handed out, who made Johnny's right? When all the skin was handed out, who made Johnny white? When all the souls were handed out, who made Johnny God? And now we'll shift to a different poem. This one has to do with human smuggling. I was fortunate enough to actually get to interview someone who had been smuggled, and found out that about 25,000 people a year go a very strange route. They actually come over. In this case, he was fleeing a murder that he witnessed, and he dared to witness against the murderers, driven out of his homeland. But he flew over to Pakistan. No, he flew over to Brazil and then proceeded to go up a land route to America. This is about a 20-page poem, so I've just picked a snippet out that I think is among the more dramatic. This is him starting in the Colombia coastline. He's going to cross to Brazil in an open boat, and then he's going to take a journey on a smuggler's trail. This is from my Pilgrim's Elegy. Breakers whitewash the fence of the horizon. Lost souls that walk on water tease the foolish on this headland. Breathing of the sea deceives me. Crescent and the stars forewarning. Magnify this steely morning. Will we safely fly these waters? The prayer rug spread upon the sand. This jagged foam and weathered strand preys upon our halls of passage. I call to Allah and give homage. Our captain of salt roomy eyes, piloted bootleg truth with lies, puts his faith in whiskey and rye, a placenta for paradise. Barks his orders to the living, huddled beneath a carapace of canvas and fear. An overloaded cracker jack breaks free its landed bonds. And we will to the Hajj someday, to pilgrimage, to fast and pray. And the water cried, murder! while we became flying fish, nets of foam flung upon, two brushed like a beard on the razor of the sea. I see their arms momentarily. Sky, sea, rocking in eternity, dancing flash, the lithium of lightning striking water, raining veil, wedding to a heart attack seized sea, endless bailing, water gating, the metric of our lives beaten by the rhythmic allegro of the waves, a watery crescendo that shouts fortissimo. We'll bend to Mecca on our knees, breathe in the life we all believe. Very last one. Judges of jungles, skulls rule the side trails, snakes rule the mangroves, leeches rule the water, flies jewel my wounds, a coverlet of movement on scarred brown skin. Wounds fresh squeezed from the boa's trail, the distemperament eyes tell the tale, while rabid mouths are spewing spells. Wraith-filled skulls live in spirit shells. The jungle mafia, mockingbirds of malice, dealing suffrage from the barrel of a gun for our smartphones, for our money, for our dignity. Comings and goings in 3/4 time, 3/4 coming, 1/4 gone. The immortal gestation of the fallen, holding a king's coronet of sorrows, found in night sounds of the jungle corals, bedding down with the mistress of mangroves, keys to the long sleep of no tomorrows. My children's jasmine weaves my vine that scents the breeze in summertime. That's it.
You've just heard Bill Fay reading from Passages, Immigrant Experiences. And I want to just also highlight that in addition to these, as you said, longer epic poems, each one is also, there's beautiful watercolor artwork that accompanies each of these stories that Bill has not just researched, but been in conversation with one of the folks in the ICE detention center to create these poems. A lot of research went into this work. Thank you so much for sharing such a unique way to support folks whose voices otherwise would have a very difficult time being lifted, to hear what their experiences have been. It's so important to understand that different way that people experience not just humanity, but incredible inhumanity. And you give voice to both sides of those stories. So thank you very much for Passages, Immigrant Experiences. And we'll also look forward to hearing from the next collection of your work in conversation with folks who are currently homeless as well. Thank you, Bill Fay. Well, friends, we go right back over to the 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 shadowy experiences, and also the resilience of human experience from the West Coast in the ICE detention centers of Tacoma, Washington, over to a very different voice of experience in Angela Dribben. And when Angela first read from Cultivating Voice, it was in one of our open mics, and I felt like there is a poet like no other. And I look forward every single time I can listen to the poems from your debut, Every Girl. Every minute with you is a wonder and an experience. And I'm so grateful that you are a part of the Cultivating Voice, of my Cultivating Voice experience. I can't express it enough. And I know that many, many folks feel similarly from every performance that you have shared with us. Well, here is Angela's more formal biography. Angela Dribben's debut collection, as I mentioned, Every Girl, was a finalist for the 2020 Broadkill Review Dogfish Head Prize and is out now with Main Street Rag. She's a contributing reviews editor at Cider Press Review, and she recently posted for us an incredible review of Don Krieger's book, Discovery. Thank you for sharing that with us on our site. Angela's poetry, essays, mixed media, and reviews can be found or in forthcoming in Cave Wall, Eco Theo, the Crab Creek Review, Crack the Spine, and others. And her poetry is widely anthologized as she joins us today from Virginia with her most unique spin on the human experience. Thank you for being here today. She also hosted Cultivating Voices live poetry for our May Day event. And I'd love to have you come back and do that again with us. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me host that. It's really a funny thing because I found that hosting and writing reviews almost appeal to me more than writing poetry and reading poetry. There's something about hosting and reviews and that kind of thing, that the kinship that grows from that. So thank you for letting me do that. Young mothers. My 4th grade class field trips to Uncle John's Hog Hotel. Mrs. Edmonds wrestles the yellow bluebird off the state road, down past Pop Pop's 9.9 mile per hour sign and Grandmama's flaming ditch lilies. We pass the hickory chipper and my friends throw the windows up, 32 clicks. Giggles. Children squeeze their noses, gag, hug their bellies, laugh, and think it's hogs they smell. But it's waste, rushing, a river beneath the building's grated floor. I can't smell it anymore. We single file into Uncle John's front room, smell of antibiotics, masked manure. We hold a straight line, expectant. Pressed up against wide doors, I wait to lead them in to see the mama hogs. In the dark dampness, as if the whole place had sunk, a ship inside, boards wet and swollen. Jelly shoes and Chuck Taylors prop on pins, metal rungs, Jordashes press against impoundments, skins dusty and sticky with Virginia's spring air, lean in to watch the sow mother her babies. Stink forgotten, even boys ooh and ah. Girls hold hands, boys punch each other's shoulders, mama feeding babies like she's supposed to do. We wrap tighter, closer into the promise. Her breath quickens, muscles tense, no one notices. I want to warn them, familiar with the painful precision of a mother's lash, but no one ever hears me. The sow stands up, yanks her nipples away, spins into the air and lands hard, squishes her children through the gates, splatters tissue to wash away with waste. Quiet claims the space, except for whirring fans. Other kids look away, not me. All I know is what young mothers will do when babies hold them back from slumber parties, force them into marriage on a hog farm at 16. But you know, family is complicated, and so is love. And as I grew older, this is where I was, where I am. A love poem for my young mother. My darling, I will call you that from now on, as your father did, as my father did. 1973, 16, pregnant, allowed to finish high school only because you married my father, or my father married you. It is hard to tell in the photos. Your hands clasped tightly to one another seem to be turning blue. No flowers in the picture, except a white corsage too big and too close to your neck. A fern in the far off corner left over from Sunday. Not married in the family church, but one 3 towns over. There are no bridesmaids. When I ask who was there, you pretend you cannot remember. My darling, I was there, the reason for this whole affair. Of course, you had not seen my forehead yet, so you weren't sure if you were marrying my real father. You only knew that he is a better man than your friend's older brother who promised a ride to the lake. Instead, he held you down while you swallowed your voice. In case your sisters forgot to tell you, you deserve the family church, a wedding dress without gaudy flower print, as much education as you want. And as ever, I will call you my darling. It amazes me, like the things that we inherit and like the storylines, you know, like every generation, like, are we going to solve it? Are we going to bring it to a conclusion? And when you read this book, you notice there are many sexual abuses and many rapes. And it's just, when my mother first told me that she had been raped and that it could have been me, I thought, is that why this happened to me? Like, is that part of my story? Is that part of what I'm healing? And so all of this you could call true. It was my fault. It is not. Afterwards, I threw up pretty, an off-shoulder black velour, and a broomstick skirt the shade of iris beards. Drunken is deserving. I was a whore, I was a virgin, if we don't count all that was taken. He was a bad boy, I was his good fuck before I woke up kicking and screaming. Never, no. Just guttural sounds, meaning something like loss, sounding like the slap of a bait fish against fiberglass, broken fins, cigar-sized burns from farm runoff. He became a good man, husband, father to fatherless children. My womb still holds all the faults, like remnants of scrambled eggs and a coiled copper scrubby stinking in a glass dish at the corner of the kitchen sink. Let's see. And I think a lot about this. Someone from my town, I'm from a really small town, and I knew, like, I moved back and got on Facebook to promote this book. And of course, all my friends from home joined me on Facebook. And so, of course, they knew about the book. And of course, they ordered it to support me. And of course, I was not saying how completely 100% beautiful this place is. It's beautiful. It's also really ugly. I think it might be part of the human condition. And so someone who recently read it emailed me and said, I just want to tell you, I don't think you can heal if you're angry. And I think you might just be writing this to hurt others. But there is so much accountability in it. And I realized, because then the next email was, reading this book reminded me of how much I hadn't healed. And it reminded me of another thing that every girl is doing. It is an invitation to every girl to come with me through these stories I'm willing to tell you. And if there's a part that resonates, to come heal with me and to work to change our human condition so that this isn't a story that keeps needing to be told. Forgive those as we forgive. A military prep school, 2 battalion commanders, 3 defensive backs, a postgraduate point guard, a goalie, not the band, one of the Highlanders complete with kilt and bagpipes, all before I was 15. By 24, there was a man who said his wife didn't understand him, another with a 6-inch lift on his pickup to make him look taller, 2 heavy drinkers, 2 heavy-handed, one who was both. A pilot, a ninja, a live mannequin, and a water slide tester. Therapists and biologists say every man who comes inside a woman leaves his mark, whether she chose him or not. I was a scarred, scared young woman, mistook love and safety as something that came in the shape of another satisfaction. Some science says sperm may divide and survive in a woman's brain, possibly her nasal passages. Either way, sex left its smallpox behind, and some organ not yet named by Western medicine, sitting beneath my heart, percussing with it. My acupuncturist says it is the most vital organ, says mine is deflated or mutated or contaminated, its pulse wiry and fast. She prescribes granules of sour jujube fruit to sip in tepid tea 3 times a day, and I begin to forgive myself. Do I have time for 2 more, Sandy, or am I pushing it? Okay, all right. I want to leave you on a really good note, so I want to be careful. Where I'm from, there are men who hunt with dogs who bark the sound of privilege. There are men here who train their dogs to hunt, fox who cannot get free of the fence. These men perch in pulpits and pews and on a Ranger bass boat seat pedestal atop a dog cage in the back of a Chevy pickup, rifle across lap, chauffeured to pray. These men hide from their wives in a cabin they call hunting with buddies they call club, roost in the couches yellowed from time and dust against the back wall, alternate VHS tapes of Tombstone and Lonesome Dove, drunk on Bud Light, lost in hero dreams, starring themselves as Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Robert Duvall, Tommy Lee Jones. Flip caps out the broken window they don't plan to repair. A cricket fries beneath a lens, popped out of a cheap pair of glasses during an every Saturday debate over who has the biggest rack. Hardest fist wins. Or is it biggest? They pin a poster of a Vanity Fair panties model, all feathered hair and eyeshadow, just behind the butcher stand. Imagine them, sharp knives slicing through the fascia with skill and delight, separating skin from muscle, confusing the rise from the poster with the rise from the knife. There are men here who know women aren't good for much, except repeating their mother's pecan pie recipe or keeping the volume just right on the sound system, ensuring the congregation doesn't miss a syllable of the sermon. There are men here who know young girls are the easiest to hoist by their cutoffs and tank top and tan onto the deep freeze on the screen back porch while their wives shop for nuts. Like me, who believed I would become his wife in an afternoon, when I still thought his farmhouse and its tobacco fields, 2 stories and flowering poison, the air feeling like sparklers and soft grass, was something worth wanting. And I'll leave you on this. The sting and the itch. After a mowing, sweat bees swarm just above blades of fresh clipped grass. Their shimmering Granny Smith heads gather nectar from golden trefoil. Perched on splintering porch steps, careful to avoid snags of weathered wood, I lift my water jar to the knee-high pink clover, left standing because I let it. Because I like the way its rose quartz crowns bow on July's breeze. Because I now appreciate the life between effort and ease. Mowing reminds me there have always been good times beneath. Skies the color of a day without resistance. When clouds move freely and take curious shapes, like Cat Dog and Wonder Woman and Dragon Man. When the sting of sweat bees means hot dogs tongued from the Snack Shack boiler, laid gently in a flat iron bun topped with chili staining my fingers orange. Days of screen door slamming against cinder block, feet on fire from sunburned sand, cool in pools of lake water collected from our dripping suits. Pineapple and coconut on my mother's glassy summer skin. The sting of the bee wells beneath skin's surface. Temporary. Thrill of the itch. Burning thighs on black rubber swing set seats. Flying high, enough to touch toes to purple martin birdhouses. Losing my heart to laughter on the ride back down. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for having me. Oh, and David Bridges is here. So I just have to say real quick. So when I got that response, I shared with my friend David, you know, this person is asking me if I'm angry. They're asking me if, and he said, oh, Angela, he's the one who said, every girl is an invitation. And so when I saw his name there, I just had to give him that. This has been the best community. And y'all have taught me so, so much about being a human. Thank you for being here and listening.
Well, I would be lying if I did not say that the same was mutually true for me. Of, as I said, every time, you know, I hear your poems from, you know, from every girl. And I think so much about, you know, the legacies that get carried from one generation to the next. and in some ways, never more are they poignantly, powerfully, and painfully exemplified in this, in this extraordinary debut collection. And that I have felt so, today I feel like, we're hearing poems from you, from Bill, and in the pages of Patricia's novel, we're hearing the stories that we don't always get to hear, but they are so primally there, and they're so necessary to be spoken, understood, and, as you said, that effort to heal and forgive. I love that you opened with the love poem to your mother. That's where the healing begins, as well as, I'll just mention, there are so many beautiful poems that are letters to other girls in the collection. And if you want to read more poems that exemplify, the essence of every girl, read those letter poems to the other girls. Thank you doesn't do justice. It is all I can offer you at this tender moment. A profound gratitude, and it's extraordinary. Thank you for sharing just yourself with us, the poems and yourself. Angela Dribben, everyone. Until next time. Until next time. Well, what voices today? This quartet of voices. I knew when I saw this reading come together, how prismatic and powerful it would be, because of the very different narratives that were going to be showcased. And I always like to think of these readings as constellations. I don't have a name for this constellation. I'm sure all of you, you're all poets. This is a constellation like no other. And we end today's reading over in County Mayo with another poet whose voice I also marvel at for its extraordinary truth and vigor and humor at times, and just all the ways that Anne Walsh Donnelly brings her experience to the page with every single one of her poems. And unfortunately, I mentioned to her earlier, I do not have the newest collection that she's going to be reading from. Odd as fuck is not arrived yet over from Ireland. But when I read the poems in The Woman with the Owl Tattoo, which she shared with us on Cultivating Voices numerous times, if you've heard her read anytime, you know what I'm saying about how she joins the voices of Angela and Bill and Patricia today in bringing that unique vision of one person's life that extends to help all of us understand our own lives a little better and to give voice to that. Well, here's a little bit more about Anne Walsh Donnelly. Anne Walsh Donnelly lives in the west of Ireland, where she writes poetry, prose, and plays. She was shortlisted for the Hennessy Irish Times New Irish Writing Award in 2019 and was selected for the Poetry Ireland Introduction Series. In 2020, she was awarded a bursary from the International Dublin Gay Theater Festival. And her chapbook, The Woman with the Owl Tattoo, from Fly on the Wall Press in 2019, was awarded second prize in the International Poetry Book Awards and in 2020. And in her first full-length collection that we're going to hear from today, Odd as Fuck, was published just this May. I went to the launch, incredible, from Fly on the Wall Press. We love what Belle Kenyon does, and we love that she amplifies your voice. And she is a Galway poet whom Kevin Higgins, one of my salmon siblings, has said is one of the most, as describes her as, quote, the most daring poet to emerge in Ireland of late. For more information, please go visit her website. And would you join me in welcoming our final reader today, the fourth of the incredible quartet of amazing voices today, Anne Walsh Donnelly.
Hi, everybody. Thanks to Sandy Ann, and thanks Don and Kim and everybody, all my fellow readers. It's been just wonderful tonight to hear you all read. Powerful stuff, and as Sandy said, yeah, very different voices. So I'm going to add my voice to it as well. So these are from my new book, and I was actually going to ask Sandy, is it okay to say fuck? But obviously it is, because she's already said it. So yeah, Odd as Fuck it's called. And so the first poem I'm going to read is the poem that became the book, or the poem called Odd as Fuck. And this poem, I'm hoping those of you from America will enjoy it. It's pure fiction. I wrote it, I was imagining when I wrote it, two women in a rural Irish post office and what they might be saying about Anne Donnelly, because she's just so odd. So it's pure fiction, but it's poking fun at myself, and also maybe a little bit of fun at some people in rural Ireland. So here goes, Odd as Fuck. Bridie, did I tell you? Victoria dyed her hair. Same colour as a hawthorn berry. I nearly choked on the body of Christ when she knelt beside me at the altar on Sunday. I knew the day herself and Jim got married it wouldn't last. Dancing like a goat up the aisle. No father to give her away. No proper hymns at the mass. Just some of that Christa Burke shite that all the young ones are into nowadays. Wearing a purple velvet dress and rainbow earrings. Her 5 brothers were the bridesmaids. As himself said, odd as fuck. I told Jim she didn't save herself for him. And you know what he said to me? Ma, the only virgins in this town are the nuns. Paid no heed to my warnings. I know sons never do think us mammies are pure Egypts. Not an Egypt now, he's back in his own bedroom, waking up to the smell of a fry every morning. And she wasn't domesticated either. I could smell the steak burning from our house. And every sponge cake she baked in that fancy new range collapsed. Poor Jim was like an orphan yo, with no yo to feed him. We're well off without her. God only knows what kind of kids she'd have produced. And she wouldn't be the type of woman that'd mind himself and myself in our old age. But wasn't it awful sad about Dick Hanley? Only 69. Maggie will find it hard to manage the farm on her own. I hear her daughter's coming home from Dublin. Got a teaching job in Ballina. She'll be on the hunt for a man. A laying hen like her will have no bother getting one. Bridie, did I tell you? Jim's applied for an annulment. I'm posting his application now. So there you go. That's just having a bit of fun and lightening the mood a bit. Okay, so the next poem I'm going to read, if I can find it here in my book. I'm not used to reading from a book. I'm used to reading from a chapbook, which is much smaller. This is like a whole book. So trying to find the pages is still challenging me. Okay, so this poem, one of the themes in the collection is the transformative power of pain and suffering and the growth that can come for it. And this poem kind of personifies that and honors my own growth. I stride into the fog, like scissors cutting through parchment. Its low opacity allows a forest to form. I scrape moss that measles a pine's trunk, tear at the dark bark. It crumbles like shortcake. I bore a hole to the rings of many winters. Thick resin oozes. I watch it make its way down the trunk like an overweight slug. My heart empties and the spring sun enters. I lie on the forest floor, ear to ground, listen to the trees' growing pains, and remember my own. Okay, the next one is called Jackhammer. And I wrote this reflecting on toxic relationships. And in the poem, I'm the Jackhammer. That will make sense when I start reading it. So it's called I'm a Jackhammer. I'm a jackhammer in his builder hands. Days I lie on the floor of his high-ace van, marinating in diesel fumes, bent nails for company. I come to life when he grabs my neck, plugs me into the power socket, stands me on a slab of concrete, his feet positioned either side of my body. He tilts me back towards his bullish hulk, presses my chiseled tip into a crack on the pavement, and squeezes my trigger. I machine gun into life, frightening children at play and myself with the noise I make. He wears foam plugs in his ears, gripper gloves on his hands, safety glasses over his eyes, while my naked head hammers into cement and stone. Powerless to stop, I demolish the path that lies before me. Chunks of concrete fly through the air like crazed spitfires until he takes his finger off the trigger. When finished, he wipes chalk grey dust from his high-vis vest, throws me back into his rusting high-ace fan. I wait until he grabs me again. That's the first time I read that poem, so to an audience. Okay. Okay, so the next one, there's a few poems in the collection about grief, about how overpowering it can be, and various things, and some of them are, well, how can you write a nice poem about grief? But anyway, some of them are kind of coming to terms with grief. But anyway, this poem is called Rodeo Cowboy on a Bronco. And I was trying to express, do you know that feeling you have when you're grieving and you think you're done, but it comes back again, it comes back in waves. And I remember a time when I was grieving and I was like, kind of like trying to shove it off my shoulders, and it just wouldn't go away, and it kept coming back. So I was thinking about a horse, a bronco in a rodeo, and a cowboy on its back. So basically I decided to write a poem where the cowboy is grief, and he won't get off the horse's back. So anyway, it's called Rodeo Cowboy on a Bronco. Grief grips my belly with his ties, grimaces as I stomp and snort, inhales my excrement and his sweat, roars as we burst from the chute. He grazes the girt of my body with steel, grips the leather rigging on my withers, pulls his knees up as I buck, then rolls his spurs along my shoulders. Grief leans back as I descend, clings to me until I toss him to the ground. He is the next cowboy who straddles me, just when I think I've broken free. So there you go. Okay, I have a few poems about the menopause in the book, because obviously I'm going through the menopause. But actually, I think a postmenopausal. I was on a workshop about the menopause last week, and apparently, maybe this is too much information for men, sorry, but apparently if you're a year since you had your last period, that you're actually postmenopausal. I thought you were still in the menopause. But anyway, that's too much information, I know, for some of you. Sorry. But anyway, okay, so the first one I'm going to read is called My Menopausal Womb. The hairdresser empties tubes into a black bowl, stirs a mixture of what looks like day-old blood. 366, he calls the dye. He pastes my greying hair. It doesn't take long to cover. 30 minutes of flicking through Image, Hello, and Good Housekeeping, and I'm scarlet again. The gynecologist puts my feet in steel stirrups, tells me to spread my legs, covers his hands with latex gloves, grabs a speculum, tells me to cough, and inserts. When he withdraws, I know what he has to say before he opens my mouth. And I wish there was a colour like 366 that would turn my shrunken womb scarlet again. So there you go. And the next one, just to add a bit of spice to it and a bit of humour to the whole occasion, next one is called My Menopausal Vagina. So, sorry, any males watching, you're probably thinking, geez, this one is pure daft, it's time for me to go. But anyway, it'll give some of you a laugh anyway. So, my menopausal vagina is the village's oldest pub. Doors wide open. She ignores medical experts who call closing time. She doesn't miss sex hormones that disappeared with the dusk. She's still quite a capable host, and her parties never run dry. She doesn't feel like a forgotten World War I trench full of sludge. Prefers to think of herself as an estuary. Kayakers, windsurfers, and paddlers still want to explore. She delights in their enjoyment of her brackish waters that leaves a salty taste on the tongue. My vagina is not a posy that will welcome a man's nose. She's ragweed, not easy to contain, liable to poison mules and asses stupid enough to wander into her pastures for a munch. Ignoring the women only sign she's erected at her entrance. There you go. I hope you enjoy that one. Okay, what have I got left to read? Have I time for two more, or will I just do one? Sandy's not saying. Can I do two more? Can I? Okay, two more. Great. Okay. So this one is called I Kicked Open, and I actually wrote this poem 9 years ago when I started writing. And I can't find it now. That's Jesus. So yeah, here we go. So 9 years ago I wrote it, and very prophetic, really. It was just had started writing, and so yeah, it was a dream I had. So here it is anyway. I kicked open my childhood home. Door hinges screeched. I ducked when a house wren dropped from the rafters, chirping like an alarm clock. I yanked open cupboards, swiped cobwebs. Spiders fell. A whimper stopped my foot from stamping the creatures that once made my 6-year-old legs leap into my mother's lap. The flagstones parted. I crept downstairs. You were in the candlelit cellar, alive, waiting for me to set you free. My wild and wonderful self. And finally, one more, and I really want to read this one because it means a lot to me. And I'll tell you why it means a lot to me. January was probably one of the most brutal months for people in Ireland in terms of the pandemic and COVID, and it was our third wave, and it was a brutal wave. And I remember one day going for a walk in a park, which has a lake. And on the hill in the park, I could see the hospital in Castlebar here in County Mayo. I was looking at the hospital, and I was just thinking I was thinking first of all of doctors and nurses and all the frontline staff and how horrendous it must have been for them. And then I was thinking about the patients in the hospital, those in ICU, those on taking their last breaths. And then I thought about their families and how they must have felt, and just all the suffering around the world. And I suppose for me in particular, I was sitting on that bench on a frosty morning in January and looking at the hospital, and I found myself praying for them all and sending them love and healing. And of course, then I went home and wrote a poem. So here it is, called January 2021. I sit on a frosty bench beside the half-iced lake, smile at a barking terrier and hooded stranger. I whisper to robins hopping on the frozen ground, notice for the first time their burnt orange breasts. Unknown divine energies move through me. My body trembles, hair electrifies, fingers tingle. Unable to contain the divine love within, I unclench my fists. Heat rises from my palms. I send it to you in your hour of need. My robins spread their wings and fly. And that's for anyone who have suffered in the last year. Thank you for listening and for watching. Hope you enjoy that. Thanks, Andy.
And thank you for bringing your wild and wondrous self today to the reading. You know, I always know, because I've heard you read a number of times. You know, I know what you're going to bring every time, and it's always skyrockets even what I think is going to happen. And there was nothing truer than today. And what I really appreciated so much was that we really went from that story of every girl to stories of every woman. And you know, and the necessity, again today, the necessity so much of hearing those stories that we're often ashamed to tell, and that it's breaking free of that shame and that silence that is the thing that leads to like our truest humanity and our truest ability to connect with each other across genders, across time, across different experiences. So thank you for reminding us of the full spectrum of our lives by taking us through the poems in Odd as Fuck. I love the book. I'm so glad I went to the launch. And folks, Anne will be back with us in 2 weeks for our Poetry Pride Parade. So mark your calendars. Yes, we're all clapping. Thank you so much. I also, as I said, you know, each one of our readers today, could we just unmute for a moment and give a great round of appreciation to Patricia Carragon, Bill Fay, Angela Dribben, and Ann Walsh Donnelly, just for everything that they brought to the human experience today, to, you know, to name the pain, the power, and the hope of how we endure and how we move through time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to read with such a wow with everyone today. Wow, really.
Yes.
Bill, Angela, and Anne, what an honor. Thank you, Sandy, for having me read today.
Yep,
Well,
thank you to everyone, and thank you to all the other poets. I was flabbergasted. It was wonderful. Thank you all.
Well, as you heard, you know, today on in our new book showcase, we have the opportunity to come together to put together a prismatic group of voices and elevate them and hear the stories of experience that often are not heard, and those that we need to continue to hear. Everyone, I'm so grateful for all of you for coming out today. And if you have an upcoming reading now or an announcement, now would be a great time to type that in the chat, as I'm just reminding you of what's up and coming here in the rest of June. Well, next week, we're going to be celebrating Juneteenth, which is a holiday here in the United States that honors the Emancipation Proclamation, the true holiday of when in 1865, U.S. troops entered Galveston, Texas, to let slaves know that they in fact had been free for 2 years since 1863. We're going to be featuring this incredible anthology from edited by Kim Roberts. And the book is called By Broad Potomac's Shore, Great Poems from the Early Days of Our Nation's Capital. And that was, of course, be the US nation's capital, with special guest poets reading poems that she's curated from the anthology and talking about abolition, reclamation, reparations, and really the history of civil rights through time, through poetry. It will be quite a Juneteenth celebration of Black Lives Matter, and I hope you'll all join us next Sunday. And then in 2 weeks, as I mentioned, we will be celebrating together with an incredible parade of poets for our second annual Poetry Pride Parade with Ann Walsh Donnelly, Kai Coggin, Charles Flowers, Gustavo Hernandez, Karen Poppy, as I mentioned, Ann Walsh Donnelly, Minnie Bruce Pratt, Julie Marie Wade, Mark Ward joining us from Dublin, and our live open mic, which will be hosted by Emma Black. So I hope you'll all return for the next 2 weeks to close us out for this month of June and important voices of poetry. None other than the new book showcase that we heard today from Patricia, Bill, Angela, and Anne. And reminder, you can register for all of our readings on our event pages each week to join us here live. I love it live, as you all know, here in Zoom, or watch us live from Facebook. We also, of course, want to thank everyone who's joined us today live. And of course, thanks to Don Krieger, who makes it possible for many of us to also watch the recordings so that we don't miss a Sunday. And Kim Ports Parsons, who does such great work to promote our readings. So grateful for this team that brings our bigger team of poets together every Sunday. You know, our humanity always depends on our deep listening of one another. We practiced it today, and I encourage us all to continue to practice that on behalf of the generation before us, our generation, and the generations ahead of us. Everybody, please take care of yourself this week. Take care of your beloveds. And as I always say to y'all, keep writing. We'll see you next time. Be well.